Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
Welcome back, everyone. I am your host, Scott Henderson, and my co-host is Dr. J. We are experienced investors with a huge advantage as we have been able to learn from our family that has well over 100 years of experience in real estate and other alternative investments. Here on Master Your Millions, we seek to share that experience that we've learned and expand our knowledge as we talk to the top leaders in alternative areas of investing. We're super excited for our guest today. Jason, who do we have coming on?
Well, Scott, we have, believe it or not, a Cache Valley, Utah native. That's where I live. He was born and raised here, who spent 13 years of his career at a company that some people may have heard of. It's called Vivint. And actually, when he was at Vivint, he played a critical role in growing the annual revenue from 30 million to well over $1 billion. Part of that is for the fact that he is such an amazing salesperson and a good manager of people. He gets along with people very well. After leaving Vivint, he has gone on to be an investor with some private equity and some other kind of funds where they do everything from provide people with homes to live in to places to eat. He is also an adjunct professor at Brigham Young University. And well, I could go on and on. There's lots of accomplishments of our guest. However, I probably want to say at the top of his list are his wife, Chelsea, and their 4 children. So welcome to the show, Casey Baugh. We'd love to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit, what was it like at the beginning of Vivint? Were you out knocking doors?
Yeah, I went down to Utah Valley to go play baseball. And, you know, I'm one of 7 kids from Logan. And so we didn't have any money to pay for school, and so kind of immediately had to get out and go find a job, and ultimately that led to knocking doors. And had a friend who'd gone out and done it and done well, and it was a kind of it was going to be a one summer thing that turned into a 17-year career. And it was just kind of this, you know, serendipitous epic run. You know, started out with a small company that went bankrupt and started at Vivint when Vivint had just raised money from Goldman Sachs at a $50 million valuation. And, you know, when I left, they were a $13 billion enterprise company between Vivint Solar. And it just kind of, I got super, super lucky with where I ended up and just got on the right train. And it's kind of that adage, you know, if you're on a rocket ship, you don't really ask what seat, you just get on and strap on. And that was my experience. So.
Well, they say luck is nothing more than preparation meeting opportunity. Talk to us a little bit about what you believe some of your preparation was so that you could take advantage of that.
You know, I think luck, you know, I don't want to like humble brag or anything and say I got lucky. Like I worked my ass off for a lot of years, you know, and still do. And so you know, I'm not discounting giving your heart and soul to something, planning every single week, you know, doing your very best for a long time. But I also have, you know, really talented friends that worked in the same industry, that worked with a company that just didn't make good financial decisions and the company went out of business. And so there's some of it that you just, you know, you can't control. You kind of get lucky that it worked out more from a macro level than a micro level. But I am super proud of, you know, what I've left it all on the field for my career. I've never cut any corners and always done my best. And so those are the things that aren't lucky. Those are just like, you can control those things. You can wake up, you can, you know, get your mind right. You can plan, you can prepare, you can bring the right energy to your relationships. But then there is like an element of just like serendipitous luck. That's just right place, right time, kind of the universe aligns to make it happen, you know?
So learning a little bit about you and some of your successes and how you've gone from thing to thing, and it seems like you've done really well. I'm very impressed. Yet there's got to be some example where you skinned your knee, when you had a failure. Talk to us a little bit about one of your biggest failures along the road.
No, the failures are the ones that you learn from.
Absolutely. That's why we want to talk about it.
When everything's going good, that there's a tendency to pat yourself on the back and think that you're better than you are. You know, that there's 21 laws of leadership. There's a guy named John Maxwell that wrote this book, and one of the laws is called the law of momentum. And when you have momentum, you get more credit than you deserve. And when you don't have it, you get kind of less credit than you deserve. And all of us fall on kind of that pendulum in our careers where there's times where you're doing way more, you know, you're absolutely killing it and you're just not getting the credit for the work that you've done. And there's other times where people are like disproportionately allocating the amount of credit you get for the work that you did. And I think, you know, the goal is to go build momentum. It's hard to build, but once you get it, you just have to ride it. And, you know, for me, my first 3 years, I worked for a company. It was a startup company called Atlas Marketing. They did Dish Network and DirecTV. I made $50,000 my first summer, which back then it was like $50 million. I mean, it completely changed my life, you know. And then I made 200 grand the next year and 250 the third year. And I just thought, like, my ship has come in. Like, this is the end of end alls. And, you know, at the same time, you know, I was reading all the investment books, but I was still like so green and, you know, invested in real estate at the peak of the market, 2007, you know, invested in like a gym franchise with one of my buddies. And in the course of 2 to 3 months, the company that I was working with went bankrupt. The bottom fell out of the housing market, and some rental homes that I had purchased all of a sudden were 50% underwater. The home that I was building, my construction loan was worth 200 to 300 grand more than the actual house was worth. And so I had no way to go to long-term financing. And I'm 24 years old, kind of thinking, man, I did everything right. I killed myself. I saved up my money. I put it to work and just got smoked. And I had $100,000 left. That was kind of my nest egg. 110,000 actually. And my boss, right before it went under, came to me. He said, "Hey, do you still have that 100,000?" And I said, "Yeah, you know, but I've decided not to invest it. You know, I'm going to kind of ride things out." And he said, "Hey, do you think you could loan it to me, short-term loan? We have some turbulence in the business. I'll personally guarantee it." I said, "Yeah, for sure." Like, didn't get any paperwork, just handshake, wrote him a check, and he stole my money. And so, like, at 24 years old, it went from, like, for me, what was riding as high as you could ride, to lose my job, ultimately, you know, have to negotiate with the bank to get out of my house. The last money that I do have that I'd kind of saved up for a rainy day, my mentor steals from me and just kind of breaks my heart. You know, like, you think about like the trust you have for that first mentor in your life, in your business life. And, you know, it's like a parent that just kind of betrayed trust. And so all those things, you know, so hard things. And I look back and, like, it was the exact thing that had to happen for me to end up at Vivint. I never would have left that opportunity. Things were going well, you know, it was going great. And I never would have looked. And not only, like, it forced me kind of in the course of a month to burn my ships and to go all in on a career that I had, you know, if I was really honest with myself, I was too good for the career. I thought that work was kind of beneath me, that going door to door and selling stuff, you know, that was a job that was beneath me. I was going to get on to the real work. And in 2007, 2008, you know, the real work was losing their jobs. It was realtors. It was anybody who was self-employed. It was investment bankers. I mean, I think there was 13 or 14% unemployment. And I had this skill set that was worth a lot of money. I could produce, I could recruit and lead people. And my, you know, probably the most influential mentor in my life, a guy named Todd Peterson, sat down with me, and he'd made good decisions. So we had a lot of surplus capital. at that point, and he just said, "Hey, we're going to go build $1 billion company, and come do it with me, and we'll get you some equity." And I just said, "Yeah, let's do it." And so I kind of signed up to go do this as my career, and I was fully committed. And I think that's something that I look back and I'm like, I had nothing to do with that. Like, I had to like hit rock bottom to be able to commit the way that I committed. And so it was this blessing. It was this gift from God that I, had the eyes to see the opportunity. And I was in like a humble enough state that I could see that opportunity. And then also all that I'd got, my butt spanked so hard that I didn't have plan B. My ships were burned. And so I went out that summer and I made 550 grand. I don't think I've made less than $1 million the last 15 or 16 years. And, made a lot of money when Blackstone came in and purchased us for $2 billion, and then made money again when we took Vivint Solar public, and made money again when we took Vivint public. And, along the way, just invested a lot in, mostly alternatives companies and hard assets, real estates and things. And so just over the course of time, became a good investor just by taking the capital that, I made working on my career and putting it to work and having it go work for me. So that's kind of my story. But when you talk about, that's probably the most pronounced failure of my career, but it was ultimately like the greatest blessing. And I could go on and on, personal life failures, me and my spouse, you mentioned we have 4 kids. We actually have 5 kids. We have 5 kids, and but we had 3 of our own and couldn't have kids anymore. Tried all the fertility stuff and it just didn't work. And, my wife was down and kind of ultimately said, we're either going to be good with our family or let's go adopt. And, I look at my family today and we've adopted 2 little boys, and it's like the greatest, you look at your family today and you're like, it had to be this way. But we went through like some dark times to get there. But you look back and you're like, those dark times had to be there for us to go down the road of adoption. And so I think about failure way different than other people. Failure, the best entrepreneurs that I know, they embrace failure. They embrace failure as a step forward and a learning experience and an outcome. And they analyze it kind of objectively as an outcome. They don't take it personally. They just take it as an outcome that happened and reevaluate it and make a new plan. And ultimately, you can't fail if you won't quit. You know what I mean? Like, you can't stop somebody that's just not willing to quit, that will get the job done, whatever it takes. So,
of course.
Right. So I think it was Napoleon Hill that says in Think and Grow Rich that every diversity is a silver lining, something along those lines, right? And when we really think about that, I mean, I've had some similar experiences where, you invest a bunch of money and it's gone. You've seen that advertisement and it's gone. Invest it and then it's gone, and you realize, what did I do wrong? I did my due diligence. This was right. This all, everything seemed to line up, and yet things went south. And you're right, when you do not allow fumbles or bad times get to you, you have the ability to use that as a stepping stone and go on to the next success, so the next peak to climb, I guess you say.
What I've experienced, I teach entrepreneurship up at BYU, and failure, the even just kind of the basic template for startups is you need to fail fast and fail quick and iterate. And so it's figuring out how to fail fast, fail cheap. In the beginning of the business, you're patient with growth and impatient with profits. Lots of experiments to go figure out product market fit in a business that works. And then once you find that product market fit, then the model changes, and you get impatient with growth and patient with profit. Once you know that the unit economics work and that you have the right thing, then it's you go get big. You go get the market. But all of that requires sensitivity and an understanding of failure. And just my whole career, I got into door-to-door sales, which by definition, you've got to fail 10 times to succeed once. And so I think just emotionally, I've just been conditioned to not be affected much by failure. Like I'm kind of at this point in my life, a bit shameless, where it doesn't bother me anymore. I just kind of, people can say mean stuff to me and it just, I don't care. What I care about is getting good outcomes in my life for myself and the people that I care about. And if somebody doesn't want to do business with me, you treat them kind and you move on to the next one, but you don't get caught up in it emotionally.
Now, a lot of people, well, you, for example, that's come with experience. I can imagine. Baseball, one, is that way. 3 out of 10 times you're doing really good. Sales, I know, is that way. I've done door-to-door myself for a long time. Yep. But when you were first starting, we have a lot of listeners who are just starting out and they're just trying to learn. How was there a certain viewpoint you had to continuously tell yourself, like, look, I just got to get to the next door? Or how did you condition yourself to get that way? And is there a way that you could have gotten to that point faster?
Yeah, I mean, when somebody, again, teaching at BYU, we have this class, there's about 500 kids in the class. And then there's a class after the class, which is it's group mentoring. And the kids that are the most ambitious will kind of stay for the extra credit. And there was a kid that said, hey, I'm going to be an engineer. My friend wants me to go do door-to-door sales with him, go sell solar for the summer. And, but I'm not going to do that as my career. Like, what's your recommendation? And my response to it was, if it was up to me, going door to door and selling would be like a mandatory internship for every kid that goes into business school. And most of it's for that exact thing that you're talking about. It's conditioning yourself to learn how to process and manage failure. And that's a mental thing. It's not a physical thing. It's figuring out how to control the space between your ears and how to think properly. And there's tons of techniques. It's a whole different podcast about the psychology of failure and, how to frame, failures as stepping stones and stuff like that. But at a high level, it's just, you have to embrace, a philosophy that the person and the company that screws the most stuff up wins, and the person that fails the most wins. And it's just how it works. You get the law of big numbers on your side. And if you're going to have one success for every 10 failures, if you go get 100 failures or 1,000 failures, you're going to have a lot of successes along the way, just because you're failing more than everybody else. But if you're trying to, wait till every light is green, there's just going to be this paralysis by analysis in your career, and you're going to miss a lot of opportunities because you weren't willing to put yourself out there. And I would go as far as to say that kills more careers and more dreams than anything else is a fear of failure. Failure to launch, a failure to try.
Certainly. Is there certain questions that you ask of yourself when you do fail to make sure that you've learned the lesson? I mean, going, for example, the story you shared with all the failures that happened in 2006, 2007. I mean, that's a long way to work back from, I can imagine.
So like a personal philosophy that I carry is that life is happening for me. It's not happening to me. And I think that philosophy matters a lot, because if you go through life with the mentality that everything had to happen this way, couldn't have happened any other way, then you process failures way different. When my high school girlfriend leaves me when I'm on my mission, and it ends up leading to me marrying my wife and having 5 kids, I'm like, what if I would have got what I wanted when I was 18? If there's so many of these experiences that you're just like, there's a bigger plan, and that God's in the details, and that there is like something bigger than me at work. And I think that faith, regardless of your religious beliefs, matters a lot, that there's something bigger at play. It helps me process failure. And so,
yeah, there's a word out there that a lot of people know about, and that's paranoia, which is basically the thought that the universe is out to get you. The opposite of paranoia is pronoia. And that is simply the thought that the universe, God, whatever you want to say, is there for your benefit. I
Yeah.
also look at it as on one side, the paranoia is a scarcity mindset, and pronoia is an abundance mindset.
Yep.
I really like the way you think, Casey, and it's obvious that you've done a lot of reading. And a lot of people that are starting out, and whether they're starting out in their career or they're starting out in a new business, or they're starting to wake up, if you will, to the possibilities and the abundance that's out there. Would you list 3, maybe 5 books that you think have been the most influential for you in your lifetime?
Yeah, I mean, there's a million of them.
Yeah, there is, and I can tell you've read a lot. But what would you say would be your top 3 or 5?
I think even more important than the books, it's the habit.
What do you mean the habit of reading?
The habit of, and it's not just reading. Like, I don't actually read that much anymore, but I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't have as much time to like sit down and crack a book, but I can like listen to a podcast or an audiobook when I'm riding my Peloton, and I can throw something on when I'm in my car driving for 30 minutes, or I can't when I'm sitting in a cold plunge, I can throw in something that's inspiring. And so there's a lot of kind of that, in between time that you can get a lot of education. And so I think it's that habit, and even like more than a habit, first, like a philosophy, like a belief that I'm going to go live a life of constant and never ending improvement. That I'm going to have this Kaizen approach to my life, that I'm going to constantly be trying to get a little bit better every single day. And then bringing that into the practices, I'm going to carve out time on a daily basis to feed and strengthen my mind. And once you get to that point that you just said, for the rest of my life, I'm going to get better every single day. And that how I'm going to do that is I'm going to allocate time on a daily basis to improve. Then, it kind of doesn't matter what you consume as long as it's pushing you forward. And so I've got, a million books. Atlas Shrugged was, really kind of influential philosophy, for me on capitalism and being productive and being accountable. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was kind of, I named my third daughter Covey, after that book. It was so influential on kind of the way that I thought about accountability and being productive and planning and prioritizing my time, my interdependent relationships with people, how I listen, how you create magic when you just are around people that are like-minded and you're working towards the same goal. You create those synergies. And then lastly, that you have a weekly process of self-renewal, that you go back to the things that are important. So that just kind of is like a life template of, how to get better. That book was super influential. There's a book that I've probably, read or listened to 20 times. And that for me is like, I love learning new stuff, but this book is just so deep. And it's a book called The Excellence Dividend. It's by a guy named Tom Peters. And, he's this, iconic thought leader. He wrote In Search of Excellence back in the 80s, and Stanford Business School, kind of got his doctorate at Stanford Business School, worked at McKinsey, just kind of like this perfect pedigree from like a business standpoint. But he spent his whole life just studying excellence in business. And The Excellence Dividend was kind of like his summary of that after 40 years. And it's pure gold. And so those are ones that, I feel like I go back to time and time and time. But, you pick a category, and I could go through 5 or 10 books on that category that have just influenced me, from, money and investing to leadership to, philosophy to your body and kind of fitness. And yeah, it's kind of pick a category. But for me, and the principle actually applies to investing too. If you have this philosophy that I am going to save a percentage of my income and I am going to invest it and let it go compound forever. And like just that philosophy, you will be wealthy. Like compounding will do its work, and you will be wealthy if you have that philosophy, just like you have kind of the continuous improvement philosophy on the personal side.
Right. So the richest man in Babylon, I think you're kind of saying that right there. The main story is a portion of everything you make is yours to keep. And when I talk about that, I add the word forever at the end. A portion of everything you keep, everything you make is yours to keep forever. And I'm talking intergenerationally. I mean, the third, fourth, fifth generation from you should be benefiting from the part of the money that you're putting away.
Yep.
So in all these different books, have you read the book Becoming Your Own Banker by chance?
Never have.
So that's really where the infinite banking concept came from. And on a scale of 1 to or 0 to 5, what would you say how much you know about it?
Don't know anything about it.
Don't know anything. Okay. Well, that is an audio book that you can get and take a read on it. It's something that I personally have, bought into, if you will, or think is an important thing in life. When I first found out about it, I basically grew up with Rich Dad, Poor Dad in the same person. His advice was go to school, do this, get a good job, but yet what he was doing was what Rich Dad was doing. He was a veteran of World War II, and he came home from the war, did not go to college, and started working his tail off. And got into real estate and development. We had a logging operation, we had a lumber company. We're building stuff. I grew up, pouring concrete and all that kind of things. Yet he wanted me to go to school. And when I get through with school, I said, wait a second, I should be doing what he's doing, not doing what he's saying. And I had come to the conclusion that the American dream, which in my mind was that your kids will do better than you, was basically dead. And I said, when I read that book, it reinvigorated me, thinking the American dream is alive, and I can do for my kids more than Dad did for me, which I thought was impossible. And I can help them with a mindset of starting to control my financial environment. And that's what that book's really all about, is controlling your financial environment. And it's really a technique that billionaire families follow. It's a way to keep it in the family and, have a fortune and pass it on for hundreds of years. So maybe we could talk about that offline, but that I got on a little bit of soapbox there. You went past something and mentioned something that I know. Well, I don't know, but most of our listeners do not know what Kaizen is. Now, explain to us that. And I don't know if you have some backstory of where you learned it.
There's a guy named Edward Deming, kind of in the 1970s, 1980s, that came up with kind of this productivity and optimization philosophy, and went and implemented it, a lot in kind of the Japanese companies. That was kind of,
the Americans blew him off basically, and he didn't have an ear, so he went to Japan. You're right. Keep going.
They bought into this philosophy of constant and never-ending improvement, this continuous improvement cycle. And if you look at Japanese manufacturing, I mean, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they literally kind of took over the world. All these great car companies, Toyota and Honda, and they kind of went from World War II, where they basically got their economy completely destroyed, and were kind of hamstrung and limping out of it, to being a world power by the 1990s. And so much of it is attributed back to this principle of Kaizen. I think just implementing your personal life, just having this philosophy that there is no end. Like, the goal isn't to get somewhere. Like, the goal is to living a great life and building a great business is an end in and of itself.
I agree. Just good thoughts. You have one of the things we stress on our podcast is the importance of having a team when we're building millions and enjoying millions. Who would you say have been some instrumental or key people in your team in your journey? I mean, obviously we want to include your wife, which probably is the top of the list.
Yep.
And you mentioned Peters. I don't remember who was a mentor at Vivint. Who else has been part of your team? And
so many. Some of them know me, some of them don't. There's the thought leaders, the Clayton Christensen's, the Tony Robbins, the Stephen Covey's, the Tom Peters, these kind of thought leaders that, I can go study them from afar and implement their ideas. Those definitely part of my team. And then there's individual mentors that are closer. And I just think it's so essential to have a model or have a view or have a picture of what success looks like. And I just got so lucky to have, a number of those people in my life at a young age, mid to low 20s, that I could say, yeah, that's how, treating your wife really well looks like. That's how giving back to the community. That's what success looks like. That's how investment, being a great investor. And so many of those things that, I've tried to model in my life came from, Todd and some of these mentors that I had when I was younger.
So was it mostly by observation, or was there somewhat of a formal, pupil teacher arrangement? What would you say?
It most definitely wasn't top down. And this is what I tell kids that, I get hit up all the time now by kids that are like, hey, can you be my mentor? And I'm like, I don't have time. Like, I really don't. I want to help. But what I can tell you is I've never formally had a mentor. But I also, when I go ask people to go to lunch, successful people have been incredibly generous with their time and their insight and their advice. But it's not them calling me saying, hey, it's time for you to go to lunch. It's me calling them. It's me reaching out. And so I just, what I stress to these kids is the success that you have is going to be you driven. Like, you need to go seek out the knowledge. It's not going to seek you out. Like, you need to, and the same thing with the people, you need to go to them. And for me, like, it's as simple as just, I've taken, when I see somebody doing something great, and I think what you guys are doing with your podcast is so great. It's a platform for you to have a conversation and to learn with people that you're interested in or that you respect, or doing things that, you like to go do. And so I think that is a sustainable, repeatable system to go get mentorship and to go grow. And for me, it was just taking people to lunch. I'd identify people that I wanted to be like, and I'd go sit down, I'd interview them, or I'd find a category and figure out who the best thought leader in that category, and then just go deep on that topic. And so, yeah, I've had those. And, today we've deployed, just over 500 million of equity over the last couple of years. And we have a team that's really important to us. We have the accounting and finance team. We have the underwriting team. We've got the sales and marketing team. We've got the video team. We've got our auditors. You have every one of those pieces are essential for you to go run a successful business. And me, with my own skill set, we'd be in trouble. We're getting on this podcast and I can't even get the computer working, and so it's like, need my hand held. But there are things that I'm really good at, but.
So you stay in your lane, right? You shine in your zone and hire it out the weaknesses.
There's a really great book by Marcus Buckingham called Now Discover Your Strengths. And he talks about the most successful people in the world, they're not well-rounded. They're sharp. They have 2 or 3 things that they're world class, and they double down on those things. And then they manage around their weaknesses. That you get it. You try to make sure that your weaknesses can't just sink your boat. They're not that obvious, but you're like, the idea of like, I'm going to take something that I'm the worst in and go be best in the world. I just don't believe it's possible. But I do think there's 2 or 3 things that each of us like are naturally good at.
So I have a client that he introduced me to a guy named Mark Eaton. I mean, he's 7'4", right? Played for the Utah Jazz. And he told me about how when he was in a summer camp thing down in LA area, and he'd been playing basketball with all these other recruits for the NBA and even people that were in the NBA. And he was toughing and puffing and attempting to do what he was doing. And he had the hardest time keeping up with everybody. Anyway, he decided to take a break and goes over and sits on the side. And this tall guy comes out and sits there and he says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm doing my best to play ball." He said, "Why are you trying to keep up with the guards?" He says, what you need to do, you need to find out and do one thing only. And all you need to do is prevent people from getting to the basket. Once you get the ball, rebound it, give it to the little guys and let them run down there. It doesn't matter whether you even make it to half court. So, okay, thanks. Well, anyway, the game kind of breaks up and people are going, everybody comes over to him and says, what'd he say? What'd he say? And it's like, what do you mean? You were talking to Wilt Chamberlain. Arguably one of the best ball players, at that time was one of the best. And so what did he say? And it's exactly saying what you said, that he needs to become good at basically one thing. And Mark Eaton did. He became the best shot blocker in the whole NBA. He didn't need to go down and score. He didn't need to run down there. So you're spot on there. I like what you're saying. So tell me, we're kind of running out of time here. Tell me a little bit, what's the next mountain for Casey Baugh? What's the next mountain? Where are you going? What are you hoping to accomplish in, say, the next 5 years? That in the event we were to bring you back on the podcast and we were able to, in the announcement, say, back in 2023, this is where he was, and he said he was going to do X, and we're bringing him back to celebrate his completion of that goal. What would it be?
I see that as holistic. So I see it as categories, and you've got 5, 6, 7 things that I feel like actually matter, and nothing else really matters. You've got your relationship with God, you got your relationship with your spouse, you've got your relationship with your kids and your family, you got your physical body, you got your personal development and growth, you got your career, and then you've got your investments. And I think like when I think about like, hey, what matters in life? Kind of that for me. And so everything outside of that's just kind of noise. And so, when I take those categories, it's like from an investor standpoint, I want to have $1 billion kind of completely diversified family office that's growing, long term. And so that, that's where we're going on that front, is to go just be in world-class investments that are compounding and tax efficient and go grow. On the professional side, we're building a business that I've had the most fun I've ever had in my career. We're building this business right now called Sandlot Partners. We see ourselves as we amplify dreamers. That's our mission statement. We're kind of a customer obsessed, excellent obsessed company that does investments. And so it's a different angle where we see ourselves as a high-end service company for top 1% high net worth family offices and RIAs that has access to the best investments. And so we kind of end up being a marketplace that gives access to, somebody that made money, but maybe doesn't have access to the best real estate deals or the best private equity deals or private credit. And so we act as kind of a middle person and add just as much value as we can. So we've had just over 800 people that have written us a check over the last 2 years, and that number's growing really rapidly. I think we'll deploy $300 to $500 million this year in real estate, private equity, private credit, tax vehicles, oil and gas, energy. And, I don't know where that thing will go, but it's growing like crazy. We're having a ton of fun, major product market fit. So I think in my career, it's that. As a husband, we've been married, this will be 18 years, to, have more magic and more intimacy and more passion and more love, when I'm 22 than I do at 18 would be the goal. There's so many people that are married, but they're living together. And I'm like, I don't want that. I want like a special marriage. I want something that like we work on it and we have passion, we've got love, and it's like we're still dating all the time. And I'm going on a date with my wife tonight and try to put in the time, effort, and energy to prioritize it. With my kids, I want to make sure that my kids know that I loved them, that I taught them how to work, that I modeled the right behaviors. My body, I want to be in the best physical shape that I've ever been in 5 years from now. And on a personal development front, there's a ton of stuff that I always have stuff that I'm trying to, like, I'm going back to Harvard this year. I've gone for the last decade. doing a 3-week program. It's called Owners, Presidents, Managers, where you're with 180 business owners from all over the world, and you go there for 3 weeks and, study and work on your business and meet new people. And so I try to build those things into my schedule every year to continue to grow personally. And for me, kind of spirituality. And then the last one is just relationship with God. Like when I say spirituality, for me, like being close to God is 2 things. It's when I'm growing and when I'm progressing, I feel completely lit up and alive. And when I'm serving people, when I'm changing lives, I feel the closest that I can feel to God. And so I think it's building a life that does both of those things a lot, whether it's my kids, whether it's my community, whether it's my church organization, whatever it is, just, living a life of service and contribution. And also, never stopping personal growth. I think when you say, hey, what does 5 years look like? If I've done those things, then, I'm on track. And I try to build like the habits and rituals that are going to get there. I think the most obvious thing that I've learned over time is that we default to our lowest habits and our lowest rituals. So motivation's fun in the moment, but when motivation lags and when you're tired and you're fatigued, you'll default to the lowest denominator of habit that you have. And so it's trying to like be very conscientious on all those categories of what are my habits, like that are automatic. I don't need to think about them. They just happen, that are going to get me this outcome. And so try to build a life that has these habits and rituals that lead me to where I want to go. So anyway, long answer to a short question, but that's how I think about success. It's, money is one aspect, but for me, money is a magnifier. Money just makes you more of what you are. It just gives you a bigger platform to be what you are. Money's not the end all.
Cool.
I think, anyway, long answer to a short question.
Well, cool. We really appreciate that. And we've really appreciated you coming on. Thank you. If any of our listeners want, if any of our listeners wanted to connect with you or Sandbox, how would they go about doing that? Sandlot, excuse me.
They can get online and find Sandlot. And then, I'm on the social media platforms. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and, but it's not from like a social presence. And I don't have a big one. Like mine's, it's pretty private. But if they wanted to, they could go find me on Spotify or on Instagram or Facebook. And then Sandlot, just go online and you'd find us.
Cool. And we will include those links in the show notes down below. Anyway, we really appreciate you coming on. And hopefully I'm excited to see what the next 5 years turns out.
No, and congrats guys on building a beautiful podcast. It's so fun to, be able to go build something that you get to look back and you get to, be a part of these success stories and these lives and to see how they grow. And it's got to be fun to do it together. So congratulations on building this.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It was fun.
Well, guys, if you want to connect with Jason or I, make sure to hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or shoot us an email. All the links, again, will be in the show notes down below. Also, don't forget, hit that subscribe button and leave us a review if you enjoyed the show. It really helps us out. And last, remember, mastering your millions all starts with your mind and your team. Make sure they are the best.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.